Do you remember the old days, when it was dangerous business to challenge the Final Fantasy VII Remake? Each time someone published a video, it was like slipping on the One Ring and drawing the Eye of Sauron, because the toxic remake fans would soon appear. I don't mean people who disagreed with us, I mean the ones hell-bent on silencing any spaces where people could freely criticize the remake games. They'd arrive with their insults, obsessed, grifter, and of course their abusive comments. Rather than ignoring a video that clearly wasn't meant for them, each upload became a bat signal for the deranged. With Remake's loud and faithful fanbase, and its own personal band of Nazgul hunting down anyone critical, it was so easy for creators like me, and like-minded fans, to get washed away in the noise. Most people critical of Remake, although united in their opinions, weren't united under a cause. They had no product to deify, and there was nothing like the pro-Remake fans had, a figurehead in Maximilian Dude, who they felt represented most of their feelings, and whose backstory of inspiring Square Enix and receiving the word of God from developers before returning to the fandom was akin to Moses coming down from the mountain with the stone tablets. And with content creators of that status, with such a wave of enthusiastic remake support online, it almost gave the impression to the untrained eye that the only people critical of the game sat in a tiny minority, a bunch of 6 or 7 old nerds who couldn't handle new things. But the truth was, remake fans had theory crafting for what might be, while everyone else had the cold hard reality of the here and now, and sticking around to chat about a game they didn't enjoy seemed like a waste of time. Many moved on to other games and other social circles. They had their love of Final Fantasy VII reawakened by the news of a remake, played the game in 2020, and then shuffled away, confused, never to play Rebirth. Yeah, these people do exist. They walk among us, and you may be surprised how many there are, because it was only a percentage of us who stayed online to discuss it. We're the ones who hung around trying to figure out our feelings, to debate in comment sections, or to try to remind people what the original game had actually said. And then you had oddballs like me, who made videos about it for all of 5 years. I was a small fry nuisance for toxic remake fans, yet they drew some comfort from the fact that I sat in a dark corner of the internet where no plants ever grew. But what would happen when a voice emerged that quickly became too big to silence? How would remake fans respond? Well, more on that soon. Because I need to remind you that, since the very beginning, toxic remake fans had a particular strategy for OG purists like us. They'd tell us to stop being negative, stop complaining, which was a bizarre thing to say to people who had a vested interest in Final Fantasy, who obviously cared enough to speak out. We're fans of the OG. We have formative memories involving the PS1 classic. Just because we had criticisms of how Square Enix chose to remake it, and we didn't want to sugarcoat how we felt, we had to stop talking? Well, what if I got enjoyment out of talking about the issues? What if, through sharing my opinions, I met lots of interesting people I never would have met, like-minded OG fans and even remake fans who shared what they were enjoying about the new games? What if people commented on my videos sharing how good it felt to have someone discuss their feelings openly and now felt like they had a place they could share their own without getting blasted? But certain remake fans would rather all that go away just to control the discussion. Well, they don't control it, as much as they want to. When we insisted on sharing our opinions, they'd tell us we were obsessed. A hilarious thing to say by people who equally endlessly comment on the game and seek out any video with Final Fantasy VII in the title, even critical ones. These people projected onto us. They told us we were bitter that others were enjoying Remake while we were suffering in disappointment. On the contrary, we were fine with you liking it. That had no bearing on us. We just wanted to voice our disappointment without someone getting mad at us, because that's all that ever happened from day one. You're a purist, a fake fan. You didn't understand it. When all along the most rational response to a fan trying to process a mind-boggling meta remake of the game they loved would be, yeah, I get why you'd feel that way, or even, no, I can't agree with that. Instead, well, you know what we got. And you know where we were told to go, to Max Dude, the arbiter of fate, who, remake fans assured us, had single-handedly connected all the dots and now held the keys to our remake re-education. Oh, we remember those days. If we rejected the hype, they told us to leave the community, and if we want to talk about remake, do it someplace else, because our criticisms were ruining their enjoyment. But then if we made social media posts or even videos about it to try connect with like-minded voices, they said we're rage baiting. A grifter after money and clicks. A hilarious thing to say to genuine Final Fantasy fans of all people. Well, they certainly can't say I'm not a Final Fantasy fan. I've got multiple videos praising the Golden Age, and at least I'm consistent with my disappointment with the modern games, which extends to 16 by the way, and each time I criticise the modern entries, I try to explain why the older games work and why I still love them so much. You may not agree with my opinions, but I think it's clear to anyone approaching in good faith that I'm being honest. Yet, within the fandom, some had labelled me a toxic entity, but the only so-called toxic content fans could find were the 2 videos where I called out the Toxic Remake and Square Enix fandom. Some people pointed to those videos like I was tarring all fans who simply wanted to enjoy the games, when really those videos were a response to abuse I had received. They were videos about a specific mindset and the odious practices employed by some fans. Practices that had led some channels to make a silent agreement never to cover Remake, for fear of its fan base.
Okay.
So, in short, yeah, if you wanted to identify into those videos, be my guest. So anyway, there was a little old me making videos, to the point where, yeah, people called me obsessed and a grifter. I had a couple videos that seemed to reach further than my normal, but all in all, I was a small-time, inconvenient nuisance. Why am I saying all this? Merely to demonstrate the disorganised quiet that appeared to be the anti-remake fans, a scattered bunch of content and opinions hidden in corners, not at all representative of what was actually a largely held opinion, even if that large opinion existed offline or in non-Final Fantasy circles. But all along I wondered what would happen when someone big enough appeared who was critical of the remake games. Someone who knew how to YouTube, someone who could go beyond niche parts of the fandom and reach mainstream audiences too. Someone with a growing voice who wasn't afraid to make it louder. Not just in one video out of 100, but I mean someone who would consistently talk about the issues of Remake and Rebirth. And in 2025, that voice finally emerged, with a creator called Sebie Webbs. If you watch Remake content and you somehow haven't seen his videos yet, he's a streamer who's grown off the back of his Expedition 33 videos, and then his latest criticisms of Remake and Rebirth, through many shorts and videos and shot-by-shot comparisons. Some criticised him of rage baiting, arguing that he's not a Final Fantasy fan. Not that this would even matter to have an opinion on Remake or Rebirth's quality, but it took me 5 seconds of research to see that A, he's been consistent. Here he is back in 2024, long before he blew up, reacting to the Rebirth scene.
Okay.
This is not a flash in the pan thing he suddenly jumped on in 2025. You can see he has a vested interest, you can see he cares, and B, not that he ever needs to demonstrate it, but he's also a fan of other Final Fantasy games and JRPGs. Of course, that was never the problem. The real problem was, Sebie had joined the ranks of inconvenient nuisances, talking about the remake games. But he soon became a new kind of problem, growing at an accelerated rate. As soon as he appeared on X, and for the first time in recorded history, we witnessed a prominent blue tick suddenly talking about the issues of Remake, rather than praising its virtue, the entire Remake fandom entered panic mode. And Sebie received the usual reaction I talked about earlier, just on a much bigger scale. The Remake fans couldn't handle it, because the narrative was changing. All those people who were on the fence about the remake were suddenly entertained or enlightened enough to start falling on the Square Enix got it wrong side, or feeling brave enough at last to voice their true feelings. Or even mainstream gamers with little knowledge of the series were suddenly watching the content and laughing alongside Sebie. They were laughing at Remake and Rebirth, and that was slowly twisting the souls of Remake fans and content creators. Obsessed, grifter, all of the usual nonsense. Now, Sebie seems fully equipped to take care of himself, but I have to be honest, watching toxic fans throw out the usual insults brought it all back to me, how they've treated you and I over the years. And it was the impetus for making this video, which I suppose you could call the final part in my Toxic Fans trilogy. Someone big needed to take all that on the chin to get to the truth of the matter, to expose to mainstream audiences just how toxic some of these fans can be. I had long believed there was a silent mass of people without a voice, people that my weird little channel or other small creators could never reach, and all of a sudden, someone found them. To see Sebie open the door and summon a horde of spirits upon the remake community, well, it was one of those supernatural events we'll talk about for some time. The more the remake defenders tried to battle with him, the more fuel they seemed to give him, and the more mainstream eyes watched it all unfold. All the toxic fans could do was label him. They called the man a grifter. But surely he's hurting his own economic opportunities right now. Square Enix certainly ain't gonna come knocking looking for a Remake Part 3 endorsement. But I kinda get the feeling Sebie doesn't care immensely about these things, because to do so would start to entirely restrict him from what he wants to say, and content creation would soon become tedious. That seems pretty clear to me, having observed his spontaneous energy, yet people want to sweep aside his takes to suit their own headcanon. Of course, once these fans are forced to accept they're dealing with a genuine fan, they go after your character, your method. Apparently it's not what he says, it's the way that he says it. I guess because he's ridiculing Remake and Rebirth. That put many Remake fans on the defensive, because they'd never before had a creator on X of that size who was willing to take consistent jabs at Remake, and not only would those jabs not disappear into the ether, but they would be seen, reposted, and reach the mainstream audience. And so they had to reply. They had to go after him. In their desperation, they saw no other option. Things became so desperate in the Remake fandom that when a channel called Last Elixer Productions made a 40-minute video outlining why the original Barrett Dine scene worked and voiced some criticisms of Rebirth's version, many Remake fans and creators rallied round and praised it as a good critique, which it was. But what those fans were really saying was, it was the kind of critique that whispers softly in your ear and tucks you into bed at night, the kind of critique that picks one thing to criticize and doesn't go overboard and run the gauntlet of Rebirth's mistakes. Their comments, of course, not at all related to Sebie's critiques and style of delivery, or even my own videos, or the other channels who had once thrown their hat into the ring, because this approved kind of critique is the type you can get behind. Not the kind of critique that's said in a funny accent, don't worry Sebie, I meant me. Not the kind of critique positioned in a way that brings overly negative attention to the game. Nothing against Last Elixir Productions, it's an excellent channel. My issue isn't with them. They appear to be largely a fan of the remake games, while also being a big fan of the OG. That's cool, and I'm just using them to demonstrate that apparently it's okay to critique the game if you do it in a professional way. Lift the games up and softly tell them how they could improve, with gentle parenting, instead of pointing and laughing at them while doing a shot-by-shot comparison, or even, as I do, attacking some of the project's biggest sins. But the funny thing is, no matter how critiques are phrased or packaged, we're all very slowly getting to the same conclusions. Now it's okay to say that Barrett and Dine missed the mark. Even Max has given the thumbs up. So we're here, and all of a sudden this seems rational. Why can't you understand how other things could have missed the mark for us too? By you even daring to criticize Barrett and Dine, aren't you showing yourself to be a fake fan? Aren't you grifting? Yes, Barrett and Dine has become the safe thing to criticize, but there are many more things someone could talk about, and there are many more ways someone could talk about them. But another element to this, of course, is it's okay to make some criticisms if you're a friend of the community. It's not what you say and it's not even what you know, it's who you know. Are you a friend of the family? Or have you been added to the content creator blacklist?
Okay, when I introduce you, I'm gonna say, this is a friend of mine. That means you're a connected guy. Now, if I said instead, this is a friend of ours, that would mean you were a made guy. Like, capiche?
Yeah, friend of mine. Friend of ours. Yeah. What do I call you? Friend of ours? Or?
Keep your fucking mouth shut about me.
But who am I kidding, really? No matter who you are, you can only get away with criticizing the project for so long. Even a channel like Last Elixir Productions is one more critique away from becoming a hate channel, from ending up on the blacklist. Even after one video semi-critical of Rebirth, their comment section was soon populated by the usual basement dwellers. A taste of what awaits any channel who might dare to critique the remake project. Gotta say, I am disappointed. I thought you were a rational guy who was just strictly making videos explaining how the OG Final Fantasy VII was developed and wasn't blinded by nostalgia. Look at that. I am disappointed. First, they want to let the channel know that they were enjoying the content before it dared to examine something that the OG did better, and now the channel is at risk of losing their support. How dare a channel criticize one aspect of the project? And then, in other words, I thought you were just strictly making videos about something I find acceptable, but now you've made something that challenges something I enjoy, and because you've done that, you're blinded by nostalgia. This is how they choose to preface their argument of why the remake works better. Think about that defensive mindset, and you'll start to understand what we've all had to put up with for years. Think how many minds have wilted under the pressure, and you'll understand why it's so interesting that a large voice has finally broken through. But whatever the power of the voice, whatever way we say it, We criticize these modern games because we want the series to do better and to be better. When Expedition 33 captures the hearts of some Final Fantasy fans while managing to blow Rebirth and FF16 out of the water by finding a way to get closer to the spirit of Final Fantasy than anything Square Enix could manifest at this stage, fans attack that new game for being the threat that it is, for being the living proof that Final Fantasy only needed to walk back towards being Final Fantasy again, and that would have been enough to save the series. When Square Enix's investors take the company to task over poor performance, fans rush to the corporation's defense, because what those fans want is not a return to Final Fantasy, to series creator Sakaguchi's design and philosophy. They're looking for something else. When Square Enix themselves reveal sales didn't meet their expectations, fans call them greedy, that their expectations were too ambitious. In short, endless excuses to cover up the fact that Final Fantasy hasn't been Final Fantasy for over 2 decades. It's been a train derailing in slow motion, and we seem to be the only passengers who knew what the hell was happening. We knew we were going into the ditch, or we were already there, while everyone else was saying, no, we're still heading somewhere meaningful. And actually, even if we have left the rails, it's better flying through the air in slow motion. Some fans tell me they're perfectly happy with what Square Enix are doing. They're enjoying the new games. Great. I'd actually encourage you to keep being vocal about your love for the games. At the end of the day, it's sales figures that will dictate which voice Square Enix listens to. And as a fellow consumer, you will not stop me from voicing my opinion. We want Final Fantasy to be a mark of quality again. When I turn on a new game, I don't want to be thinking, well, what parts will I have to stomach? Will it be the gameplay this time? Will it be the world too? It's usually the story and characters that suffer as of late, we know that. But what else is going to be subpar? The great tragedy is, when I'm discussing games in public, I don't even say I'm a Final Fantasy fan, or ever was one. Because when people ask what kind of games you like, how can you convey in a simple sentence that you're a fan of this Final Fantasy, and not this, which has commanded the last 2 decades, by the way? How can it be that random work colleagues are telling me to play Expedition 33, simply for the fact they know I'm a gamer? While, over the last 20 years, not one single person has ever recommended a Final Fantasy game to me. Yet I remember in the wake of Final Fantasy VII, all manner of people and personalities knew what Final Fantasy was. So that's why we voice our criticisms. Square Enix might hear us, they might pay attention, or maybe they'll pay more attention to the happy fans. Either way, let's be honest about our feelings. The only thing that tries to silence our voices is an insecure fanbase. And I know all these fans and creators who don't like me have to agree with me, because they've all been a victim of it in some way. Some Final Fantasy fan somewhere has tried to shut you up because you didn't tick all the boxes, because you didn't at all times contribute towards creating the ultimate hive mind voice. And that's why I think it's more important than ever to acknowledge creators like Sebie and to say, good on you for helping to serve us something different, for speaking your feelings. The toxic fans will remain deeply disturbed by the fact that you're a fan of the original games. If you hated Final Fantasy content full stop, things would be so much more convenient for them. Maybe after all of this, those fans will realize they no longer hold all the cards. They didn't understand, didn't appreciate the power they had before it was taken from them. They even tried to silence the small voices. Now let's see them put a lid on this box. Maybe now they'll stop throwing insults around. Maybe they'll stop obsessing over money and clicks they think we get for speaking honestly. You see, I'm a Final Fantasy YouTube creator. Call me obsessed, call me a grifter, but I'm not sure if you've ever noticed, I'm entirely detached from the Square Enix machine. From Square Enix social media relationships, from meet and greets, conventions, the blessing and curse of Square Enix opportunities, from game codes and freebies, from VIP invitations and collaborations with big names. Instead, I'm attached to my one simple message, that the Golden Age games were so impactful to me, and the modern games often so utterly unremarkable, and I'm willing to keep talking about that for as fun as it remains. And now you know that no matter what I said or what way I said it, I meant every word, because I'm in it for the love of the game, my favourite game. I've used my voice, however small it was. I'm just glad, at last, so many more people will have a voice in all this.